partner for him to work with, and that's why we got the work that we did out of them. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think the band was somewhat reinventing themselves, but it wasn't just Sam who came in and did that.
Right.
It was just as much Ed as it was Sam, but Sam definitely kept that band going for sure. I mean, because if he hadn't joined, I'm not so sure the band would have even been around.
Wow, that's
so,
true.
yeah, I agree with your answer that it's both.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Dave, buckle up because this one's a rough one. And we are on to letter number 5 from Dallas Rainbow. Hey, Joel, meaning he means Joel Selvin, who was our last guest on the July podcast, who was the co-author of Sammy Hagar's book, Red. Joel was giving you some great answers. It was clear you liked the sound of your own voices here. There were a few times he gave you some great insights, and it's the way you moved on to the next question that irritated me. You weren't too grateful, and I thought Selvin gave a great insight into the Van Halen saga, the real Hagar, a true imposter, and it shows in his book. Selvin gave you an honest and candid interview. What was he supposed to keep saying? He made the excuse to leave because you couldn't pick up the obvious hints he was giving to wrap it up. Thanks, Joel. And I still love you boys. Never shave. Much love, Dallas Rainbow. Oh, boy. Took it right up the can on that one, Dave.
Well, you know what? That's an interesting observation.
It is.
Yeah. You know, I mean, that could be, in retrospect, maybe. That could be. I will say, though, that our goal is when we interview people, you know, we come up with questions.
Yeah.
I should say, I mean, you come up with the bulk of the questions.
Right.
You know, we're trying to get them answered as much as we can because there's a lot of ground we want to cover. Now, typically, sometimes if somebody goes off in a direction, we'll try and follow up on that. I usually like to do that. If they go off on a tangent and I find it interesting, I will tend to expand more questions on that.
Okay.
But it's just what we find interesting or what we don't find interesting.
Right.
And, you know, if we ask the next question and you're sitting there going, well, that was an interesting topic. How come you guys didn't follow up on that? I mean, I guess we weren't as interested in it as you were. I mean, what can I tell you? That's just the way we did the interview. Should we have taken the hint from Joel in retrospect? I mean, maybe. Who knows? What can I tell you? But we didn't think so at the time. So...
Well, I tell you, Dallas, you're certainly entitled to your opinion. That's fine. But I will address your comments. I do like to address clearly to our guests exactly, you know, what we want from them and the questions. I was trying to be as direct as possible. Do I like the sound of my own voice? No, this is not an ego thing. Dave and I, this is not about some sort of ego stroke. Our goal is to deliver an entertaining interview for the listeners. It's about getting the meat, the juice, the gold for you guys to hear from the source so you could enjoy it. So we're there just to extract it. It's not about us. We're here to just basically facilitate the situation. But
exactly. In fact, we remind each other, now look, don't start getting on your soapbox about things,
Dave will often
because
do
we're
that.
here to interview the guests.
Right.
And nobody really cares what we think. They want to hear what the guest thinks.
Right, yes. And sometimes it gets into, like, a discussion. Very often that'll happen with, like, Greg, somebody we know. But, like, the questions, I thought, to be honest with you, I really went over those questions heavily. We were as clear and direct as possible. I went out of my way to sort of pinpoint specific moments in the book. The vibe that I got from Joel was almost like, hey, I was hired to do a job. I did the job. Now leave me the fuck alone. I mean, and his attitude was, hey, man, this is Sam's book. So whatever he wanted to say, he said. And I, you know, I'm the writer and I put it together for him because, you know, that was my job. But, you know, I can't sort of answer for Sam in a lot of different capacities. But the reason why I brought some of those points up was, listen, when you put out a book, you got to be careful, like, what you publish. And I know this because I put out articles, and you just got to be very careful. Like, I couldn't imagine putting a lot of those things in any article I ever wrote because it would be damning. And it would be lawsuits and people would be calling. There was no underlying message or agendas at all behind that interview. I think we were as straightforward and fair as possible. You know, him exiting at the end the way he did, to be honest with you, I thought it was kind of interesting. So I thought it was sort of a fun ending, which is fine, and that's fine. But, you know, everybody's going to feel differently about it. We just had a letter about it who enjoyed the cast. If you didn't, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to annoy you, but we appreciate you listening either way, Dallas. And thanks for hanging in there, even though you didn't like the interview. But we appreciate you listening. So we're going to go on to letter number 6, and that comes from Mr. P.O., Dave, the other Ron, not Midwest fucking Ron. But
I'm sure that's what he likes to be called, the other Ron.
The other, well, you know, Ron P.O. is more of a low key cat. You know, he likes
No, I know. But,
right.
you know.
So he gets into incredible minutia about the jumpsuit that David Lee Roth was wearing and the photos accompanying the New York Times article that we talked about in the last episode, that whether or not it was an issued 1984 one. It says it does look like an 80s throwback, and he went into a very specific detail. He says the paint-splattered one Dave is wearing looks like it's some kind of military surplus. Specifically, the fabric looks to be a little thicker, and like you said, an army jacket. And he goes through the details of the whole thing, the hook and the loop material on the shoulder pockets, to the Velcro segments, to the collar has a piece of Velcro on it, and there are pockets in the forearms, which might be a feature on certain aviation flutes. There's knees and elbows have certain additional material on there, and as you noted, it's an olive green color that doesn't match what I've known to have been issued to the Van Halen crews. So he says he does not believe that the jumpsuit is from Van Halen's 1984 tour. Perhaps it was something Dave had in his closet from his days of flying helicopters. And so he was just adding his 2 cents. And however, he did want to add, he says that the window panes that Dave is standing in front of could sure use a good scraping and a coat of paint. Perhaps why socially distancing Diamond Dave could get to work with a can of exterior latex on the mansion rather than painting frogs. Just saying. Ron P.O. Well, Ron P.O. sticking it to Diamond Dave a little bit there. I got to give him credit.
Well, he did say he's not one to throw stones at glass houses.
No, I know. He did say that.
Just making an observation about the picture he saw.
He is. Ron is like the nicest guy. He's a sweetheart of a guy. We're happy that you wrote in, Ron. It's always good to hear from you. Ron is a buddy of Midwest Ron, so it's Ron and Dave and Dave. You can hear him featured prominently on our January episode, back when the world was the world, and Dave and I were jet setters flying all over the country doing podcasts.
We snuck that trip in just in time.
Yeah, that's right. So, Mr. P.O., it's always a pleasure to hear from you. I love how detail-oriented he is. And I think you're correct, that's for sure. I love how you were pushing for Diamond Dave to get domestic and start doing home improvements. So, I think that was hysterical. So, I think Dave should get on that. So, Hup 2, maybe, and stop doing those cartoons and maybe clean up the goddamn joint. You know what I'm saying? So we are on to letter number 7, and it comes from Air Force J in Half Moon Bay, and oh my God, what a whopper of a letter this is. So I'm under strict orders here, Jay. You're from the military, so you know what this is like, and Dave's a goddamn drill sergeant, so we have to remember we have to cut this down a little bit. So I want to tell you that he says here, during the time that Van Halen searched for a new singer after David Lee Roth, do you feel the band and all involved had no other place to turn besides Sammy Hagar? That is to say, do they feel like it was scraping the bottom of the barrel to only hope for success after Dave was to use Sam? That's number 1. Number 2, he says the reason for asking, he says, throughout various podcasts, you've mentioned often the audacity and balls that Sammy had to join the band and choose not to sing the Van Halen David Lee Roth era classics. And I noticed in other podcasts, you kind of state that both Sam and the band deserve equal blame for that. However, in July's podcast, you seem to be very direct and blame squarely on Sam. Sam didn't want to sing Dave era songs, and the band still accepted him. So is it just Sam's fault? That's number 2. Number 3, he said he's a fan of Dave and a fan of Sam. However, he says, as a Sammy fan, I must admit that I really let me down with the 2004 tour. And he says, how could he let Ed go out on the road in that kind of shape? Same goes for Alex. They should have pushed the issue for him to get some help, and I think he needs to apologize to both Ed and the fans for letting this whole thing happen. Air Force J in Half Moon Bay. Well, Mr. J, number one, your question regarding did they have any other place to turn behind Sammy Hagar? Were they scraping the bottom of the barrel? Absolutely not. I don't think they did much searching. I don't think there was much time that went by. Dave left in April of '85, and Sammy was jamming with the band by the summer, so they really didn't hold auditions. As far as I know, there's always that rumor about Eric Martin coming in from Mr. Big, but he never made it there to do an audition. So
I don't think Sammy's the bottom of the barrel. I don't think they were settling for less.
No.
I mean, Sammy will tell you he was in the same league as Ozzy Osbourne and Ronnie James Dio, which I will tell you, I mean, maybe vocally, well, he's certainly better than Ozzy, and he's just as good as Dio.
Right.
But in terms of popularity and gravitas, not so much.
Right.
But no, I don't think they didn't sell for Sam. I mean, Sam certainly was popular enough and certainly was good enough, pardon the Van Halen pun,
right,
that it wasn't like they were like, well, I guess we'll take Sammy because, I mean, no, I don't think that at all.
Right,
no.
Okay. Now, he also said, we talk about Sammy singing Dave era songs, that whole thing. Yeah, I think it's Sammy's responsibility when accepting that job. I don't think there's an excuse, to be honest with you. However, yes, Van Halen is to blame for letting it slide as well, because they are doing their fans a disservice. However, Sam had this uppity attitude about the situation that kind of incensed me. Truth is, Sam could have killed some of those old Van Halen tunes. Oh my God, I think about what he could have done with Light Up the Sky, On Fire, I'll Wait, In a Simple Rhyme. I think he could have made them his own. Plus, I think that all kind of came out while he was prepping for the tour. He was already like in the band at that point, and they had already made the album, and then this whole thing came out. Yeah, I don't know if I want to,
Yeah, no, I agree that the band is just as responsible because they all tour. But I mean, maybe they should have made that clear up front.
Yeah,
that, we're going to be doing the old stuff. But I guess they didn't miss it either, which was too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying you need to do all the old stuff. But again, it's kind of like, if you really thought it was a new band, then you should have renamed the band to something else.
Exactly.
If you really thought, because Sammy was always like, it's a new band.
Yeah.
Well, it's a new band, then change the name of the band.
Exactly.
If it's not a new band, then fine. Then keep the name Van Halen and do some more of the older songs.
Exactly.
And don't tell me you have a problem with that.
Exactly.
Then you shouldn't have accepted the job.
Sure. And also, regarding the 2004 tour, blaming Sammy and Al about putting Eddie out on tour, I tell you who I blame. I blame Irving Azoff. I think it's his responsibility to make that call as the band manager and the guy who is promoting the tour. However, I think the band really ripped off the fans with that tour. It's an outright disaster. Eddie is lucky to be alive from it. I'm also surprised that Alex Van Halen, who suffered from alcoholism himself, so I'm a little surprised that he wouldn't help his younger brother out in this situation. I really don't know what the story is behind that and why.
I think there's enough blame to go all around.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know Ed is an adult, and ultimately the decision is his. But, in retrospect, was he really able to tour? Should he have been touring?
Right.
Did everybody else need the money so badly enough that they were going to put his life at risk by putting him on? Or maybe they didn't think his life was at risk.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just like, oh, he'll be fine. He survived every other tour. We'll just go on tour, and that'll be that.
Yeah, well,
I mean, look,
definitely...
I'm not in any of their shoes, so
no.
So who am I to judge somebody else?
That's
but
right.
That's what we do on this show. So I was just surprised.
Okay.
That's all.
That's true. So we have a bunch of letters that came in from Nikki from Arizona, Nikki. Okay, spelled like Nikki Sixx. Okay. Nikki sent in a whole bunch of old school articles from like Faces and Hit Parader and Circus. And my God, she sent us a ton of them, and they're so damn good. I want to say thank you so much to Nikki for being so kind and generous for sending all these old clips. I got chills reading them because I remember reading some of these exact articles many years ago. It was chilling reading the words that I read many years ago. One thing that really blew my mind was the back pages with Lou O'Neill Jr., which really shocked me. I remember meeting Lou O'Neill Jr. backstage at a Yes show in 1987. I remember taking a picture with him, which I still have, which is fun. Now, the best part of Nikki's letter was, by the way, I'm a chick not a dude. And I thought that was hysterical. We always assume it's a guy on the other end. Nikki could obviously be a guy or a girl. So a female listener, sound the horns and ring the bells, Dave. Welcome to the sausage party. We need more female listeners, so thank you so much. And tell your book club, that's for sure. That's
Wow, there weren't too many stereotypes in that sentence. I think you've nailed them all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I'm just joking around. We're happy to have female listeners. We are